Hello everybody, this is Evan Abrams, freelance motion graphics and VFX artist, here to show you the top 5 things you can do with Mocha from Boris FX, brought to you by AV3 Software. And those 5 things are, number 1, you can easily track things onto surfaces, looking at planar surfaces, and you can add things into the scene really easily with the data Mocha provides. The second thing, if adding things is cool, well, you're going to love removing things, because Mocha can seamlessly remove elements from a scene. The third really interesting feature is not only planar tracking, but organic shape tracking. These are your soft curves, your human parts, your all sorts of great things that you need to mask out. Mocha makes it super easy, and we're going to show you how to do that. Number 4, the classic screen replace, replacing the contents of iPhones, iPads, TV screens, super easy with Mocha's planar technology. And the 5th and final thing, we're going to talk about adding 3D elements into a scene. Planar tracking solution is pretty great, very reliable, and creates a rock-solid track. I think you're going to enjoy it, so skip ahead if you're really interested in one of those specifically, or follow along for the whole bunch. Brought to you by AV3Software.com, your place for professional plugins and post-production programs. Without further ado, thing number 1 that you can do is put stuff in scenes. So this is a planar tracker. At its core, Mocha tracks planes. That means you can select a patch of a scene and it'll give you position, scale, and rotation of that patch, tracking it like a plane, like a flat surface. Maybe it's the side of a building, side of a truck, street sign. You can get very reliable tracking data for that very easily. Now, After Effects has built-in point trackers, but the convenience of a planar tracker and the stability and flexibility of this kind of thing, it's really amazing. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Here in After Effects, I've already got the completed example for you to look at. This wonderful truck kind of going through the wilderness with a nice sign on it. Now, originally, there was no sign on it. It's just a blank truck, and we want to put something on it. So what we can do is just track that plane, the plane of the side of the truck, and use that data to insert things. So if you're starting over from scratch, you'll want to start with some footage, import that footage, and then drag it on to make a new composition with that footage. The next thing to do is trim it down to just the area you're interested in working with. So for me, I'm going to just cap it here at 5 seconds, just so we're showing this off. So I'd hit N and trim the comp to the work area. So this also trims the layer, so the layer has been trimmed down. You can see right over here on the corner, it's been trimmed down to just this size. Now, we want to trim out anything we're not interested in tracking so that when we go into Mocha, we're not giving it way too much stuff to work with. We really just want to focus on what's important, what we want to track, what we're going to use. We're using the Mocha 5 plugin version for After Effects, so we can just apply Mocha Pro to the footage as an effect. So you can see here Mocha Pro now in effect applied to that layer, and we can launch Mocha Pro just by clicking up here on the Mocha button. And that will launch Mocha Pro 5, and we just hit start and we are good to go. So now we're in the Mocha Pro plugin interface, and we can scrub through on the timeline. You can see this timeline is exactly as long as the footage we're working with, and we kind of want to pick a spot here in the middle. I like to start tracking from the middle outwards in either direction, so we have a nice average, and we're just going to draw a shape around the thing we want to track. And we do that simply by just clicking on the X-spline up here. So we just click once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and then right-click to end the shape. And we just want to make sure that our X-spline is going outside, it's beyond and capturing all inside of it, all of the shape that we want to track, all of the plane that we're interested in tracking. And we're not putting it precisely on the corners of the thing we want to track. We're just showing Mocha what we're interested in it tracking, which I think it'll agree is very nice. And then we can just hit track backwards once we make sure that all of our sort of track tab properties are all where we want them. So we're looking at the clip, the layer below, which is great. We could specify which clip we want it to look at. We're looking at the luminance channel, so it's saying how dark our light pixels are. And we're saying we're going to use about 90% of the pixels, which is fairly high. This can be lower, but I like to be fairly exact. And then the motion we're tracking is the translation, scale, rotation, and shear, We could add perspective in as well if we want to track all the possible ways something can move. And there is a little bit of perspective-based tilting as this moves away from us, so we might want to have that on. And then we're going to just choose large motion because it is going from one side of the screen to the other. And I think we are ready to go. So we just hit the old track backwards and see how it does. And it looks like it did a pretty good job. It is staying right on the truck pretty good. So now we can just go ahead and track forwards from that point. And we've got this thing staying on the side of the truck, which is great. But like I said, the spline isn't all the story. What we want to do is show a planar grid and then be able to adjust that grid so we can say, okay, where is the side of the truck really? And this is where we want to be a little bit accurate, moving these points into position on the edges of the truck. And the truck is a nice even rectangle. It's very good for examples. And we're just going to drag this down. So now you can see the grid has reformatted and it looks like it's stuck right on the side of the truck. So now if we scrub through, you can see how that grid is moving in relation to the truck, and that looks very accurate to me. So I think we've got a good solve on here. Now to apply this to things, all we do is save. So we just save our work, Control S, then we just close down out of here, and we're going to apply the tracking data from that Mocha solve we just did to a layer. So what we should do is bring on some stuff, and in our example we used the AV3 logo. So we can just put this out here, kind of scale it down, and we're just going to pre-compose this. So we're going to pre-compose this. We're going to call it truck side logo, which looks pretty good. And what we'll do is we'll move all the attributes into the new composition so that the truck side logo is a 1920 by 1080, 16 by 9 ratio kind of thing, because we're going to apply the corner pin effect, and it works a lot better if the thing you're applying it to is of the same ratio and size as the frame that you're applying it in. So what we'll do is we'll just go to the truck layer here, go to the effects controls, and we're going to use the export option of corner pin, and we're going to create some track data. We click the little gear on here for that layer 2, the layer that we made inside of Mocha. And it's going to populate the data out here. So you can see the corners, right on the corners of the truck, right where we left them. And we're going to export that to the truck side logo. And we're going to apply the export. There it is, stuck right on the side of the truck. So now we can play through this, and you can see how that looks. Now, it does look a little bit weird and stretched out, which is because we're using the corner pin, which is deforming it down, basically taking the corners and sticking them down on these corners. So what we'll do is we'll apply a transform effect above the corner pin, turn off uniform scaling, and what we'll do is we'll just scale the width in so that this looks a little natural. Maybe it needs to be higher and out like this. And I think that's looking pretty natural. Good. So now we just apply the motion blur, put motion blur on for the composition. So it just blends a little better. And you can blend this up, and your specific blending problems will be your own. But we just went from having some pretty difficult stuff to stick things on to having a solve that is very rock solid and just going on down the road, which is why one of the first things that amazes me about Mocha is how easy it is to just put stuff on things. Thing number 2, you can remove things from scenes. So if adding things to the scene was interesting, well, removing them is really going to blow your mind. This is, you've got footage, and let's say there are things you captured in the footage you don't want there. You didn't clean up the set enough. You've got a cola can that shouldn't be next to the interviewee. You've got a boom mic in the shot. Whatever it is, you can select it, and Mocha will remove it, which is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. So here's an example. We've got this lovely footage of a dam. You know, it's a fine dam. It's amazing. However, as we're running our drone over it, or as the drone operator was doing things that day, they didn't notice that there happened to be a car also driving in the shot, or lots of things can happen when you're trying to capture footage. Thankfully, we can use the power of technology to just remove that car. It's very simple, and I think it may blow your mind. So we're going to be doing the most basic form of what this is capable of. But let me tell you, Mocha can handle some really intense removal of objects, and it is, quite frankly, a little bit mind-blowing. But here's the most basic one, and I think you'll dig it. So you start with your footage. You've got it imported. So we've got this car over dam footage. We're going to throw it into a composition, and we're going to trim the composition to just the section we're interested in. So again, we're going to hit the beginning here, and maybe the end is around here, and we trim the composition just so we're only dealing with the footage that we want to deal with. So let's go from when that other car has left, and there we are, and trim the comp like this. What we have is the footage isolated, beginning and ending. We're good to go. So we're just going to apply to this the Mocha Pro plugin. We apply that to the footage, and then we launch Mocha Pro. We just click up there and we launch it. So here we have the footage loaded up into the Mocha interface. Now the thing we want to do is select and tell Mocha what we want removed. So to do that, we're going to just use the X spline, and we're just going to draw around the thing we want removed fairly loosely, so we can use these handles here to kind of loosen that up, just smooth out the X spline that we're putting in here. Fairly small. We just want to make sure we've got all the pixels of the car, of the shadow, what it might be interfering with, everything we want to take away, what we want to get removed out of here. And then we can just track this into the shot. We can track this thing in there so that the spline is following the thing we want removed. That looks pretty good. Tracked forward, and then we can track backwards. Make sure we've got all the stuff that we want taken out of here. Good. So it looks pretty covered. That looks great. So we'll just click this gear off so that we're not worrying about this anymore. And we're going to call this, we'll call this the remove. This is the thing we want removed. Now we have to say, where do we want it removed from, or where should you search to find the pixels to replace that thing? So it kind of drives from here, from, in between these two lamp posts, and then it goes that way. So what we can do is we can just select the area in between those posts. So we will need to draw a new spline, and it can go here, just like this. So this should be enough stuff for it to replace. You want sort of the replacement area to be larger than the thing being replaced. So the search area does need to be larger so that it encompasses all the pixels. So we'll call this the search area. And the search area should go below the thing you want removed, because we're removing a foreground object from a background. So with that gear turned on, let's see if we can track this into place. Here we go. It's trying to track it in, trying to make sure that that stays firm. Good. It looks like it's staying where it needs to go. Now we're going to track forward, just tracking it in so that it remains locked right where it should be. Good. So we've got the thing we want to remove, and we've got the search area. So I'm going to turn the gears on for those. We're going to select the remove, the thing we want removed, go into our remove tab, and this is where the magic happens. So we're going to say from frame 0 to frame 678. That's the first and last frame of this process. We want to process all those frames. And then we need to say how many frames before and after the playhead should you be looking for replacement pixels. And, quite frankly, it's set to 679, which means even if you're here on frame 0, it'll search all the frames all the way up to the last frame so that it can find something. But I think that's a bit extreme. I think at the most, really in this piece, you really only need to be looking at maybe 200 in either direction should get you there. Reducing this range will speed up the process a little bit. And then the illumination model and the dissolve, all that complex things we don't need to get into. This is all very, very basic stuff. But what we're going to do is we're just going to render here and see how well it does fixing this situation. Click on this gear here, which should render the current frame. So we hit that, we render it, And just like that, the car has disappeared. So that's pretty good, and it's showing us sort of the area it searched and what it found, and it just disappeared. So what you would do is you would render forward and backward. So you would render all of the frames of this thing so you would see, you can see it right now just removing that car from everything, removing the remove area from the search area, replacing it with pixels, and that is pretty nice. So you would do that forward and backwards, rendering all of the frames, so rendering everything so that it's all done and taken care of. And the final step is going to be to get it out of Mocha and put it back into After Effects. So there we go, we've got it all rendered. The next thing to do is to export it from Mocha so you can go make use of it. And you would just do that by going File, and then you would export the rendered clip, and you could send it out as an image sequence or a QuickTime movie. Choose the destination, and then just hit OK. And go through these things. All your basic compression settings are in there, and then you can composite it back over. Once you've done that, you can then come back here and bring that footage back into After Effects. It'll just be regular footage, but it will have magically removed the thing you wanted removed. So if we go back to our original example, it is just a flawless removal of that object. And this is the most basic form of it. The deeper you get into this stuff, the more amazed you will be, as I've been amazed by this powerful technology. Thing number 3, you can mask organic and complex things in your scene. So before we were dealing with planar things, talking flat objects, but Mocha is also able to deal with very complex splines. So these are the contours of shapes like faces or body parts. You're able to mask out hand parts. It's terrific. You're able to just select with splines, and it'll give you mask data points in shapes in After Effects, and then you're away at the races. In this example, look at this kitty's beautiful eyes. Well, couldn't they stand to be more beautiful, more lustrous? I know what you're saying. Cats are as beautiful as they can get. But if you have something like this and the eyes are kind of dull, well, then we need to isolate those and really punch them up. So we're going to need to mask them. We might need to rotoscope them, going frame by frame. But Mocha does an amazing job of capturing these organic details and allowing us to isolate them. So if we wanted to do that, we would crack open After Effects, we would import the clip, we would bring it into a new composition, and just like we did before, we would start by trimming up the layer into the areas we're interested in. So let's look at this squinting section where it squints and blinks. So that's a good end spot there. Get the squint, eyes wide open, and then looking around. That's a good place to start. So we would trim the composition to be just the pixels we're interested in, just the frames we're interested in. Again, we would just apply the Mocha Pro effect onto the thing we're going to deal with. And then we launch Mocha Pro. We're getting right into it. And in Mocha Pro, we've been using the X splines, but now we're going to use the Bezier layer tool, where we can put in some Bezier layers, which are great for matting, for tracking these organic shapes and isolating or removing them, creating excellent mats. So let's zoom in using the zoom tool right here on these hypnotic eyes that this cat has. Wonderful stuff. And now we're just going to pan over using the hand tool. I'm just going to draw in here using the Bezier path, clicking and dragging the path out around the eye, the thing that we want to isolate. So just try to be as specific as possible, getting it around here. And while with the splines and tracking with those, we didn't have to be very exact. In this case, we are selecting the exact shape, the very specific shape that we want it to stick to. So that looks to be in place. So once we've got that done, we've selected a point right here in the middle, we're just going to track forward and backwards. And we're using the same kind of tracking idea that we were using with the X splines. We're still using the luminance channel. We're still tracking translation, scale, all this stuff. But what we're going to do is we are just going to click track back, and it's going to figure out a lot of this stuff for us. So look, it's sticking very nicely into that shape right in there. Very good. So a few subtle motions, but it's still resizing and sticking these points right where it needs to be. So now let's track forward into that eye closing, that winking motion. And look at that. I just stopped it just so you can see that it's resizing to keep this stuff together. And you can just re-change some of these things. You can just warp some of the handles a little bit just to make it exact, just to get it exactly where it needs to be, just like that. And then continue tracking. We're just going to continue tracking, and it's going to spring back, and then the eye closes. Pretty good. That is pretty good stuff. Because what you might need to do is just refine it a little bit just to bring these points together. Push this down. You're setting a new keyframe when you do that. Now we scrub back through. So this is where it needs to be a little bit more accurate, like that. Scrub into here. And that's good. Okay, this needs to just be updated a little bit like this. And it's just that easy. So in just a few little keyframes, we now have a very nice, very reliable track of this eye shape. So now let's just name that layer something we'll know, like right eye. Awesome. Then we'll save this thing. We'll close this. Now we want to get that thing we made from Mocha into After Effects. So we can twirl down into the matte here, and we can say view the matte. It'll show visible layers. It'll show that right eye in this menu, and we can see the shape that we've created. So that's cool. We could apply the matte, which will just cut out. It'll cut out that eye for us, which is pretty great, pretty nice and accurate. What we can also do is create AE masks, create After Effects masks. And I'm going to create that. I'm going to click that button. And what it does is it puts the mask on the layer with keyframes for every frame. So it's keyframed every frame, and it's got the mask on there. Now I'm doing that because specifically what we wanted to do was apply an effect to only that area. And the effect I wanted to apply was perhaps a curves adjustment. So we're going to apply a curves. We go into that effect, we go into the curves, and we add in its compositing options. We're just going to add a mask reference so that that curves is only being applied to the area of that mask. All right, that's pretty nice. So what that means is we now have individual control of that space, of that area. So that means we could sort of increase the contrast in that eye. We could do that. We could go into the blues and just remove some of the blues, making it a little bit more yellow, kind of like that. Or maybe more blue. Maybe you want like kind of a weird wizard cat thing going on. So that's fun. But what we're just going to do is we're going to punch it up like that. I think that's pretty nice. So now you can see the contrast between the two. And if we wanted to do the other eye, we would just repeat the process. But that was so easy to have the computer take care of getting a reliable kind of track around that eye to get that organic shape masked perfectly and with so little effort on my part. It's pretty great to be lazy, and with Mocha just taking care of all that hard work, I feel very good about myself. Thing number 4, this one's pretty specific, but you can replace the content of screens very easily. So since Mocha is a planar tracker, you're really able to get a lock on like a TV screen, an iPhone, an iPad, a pad of some kind. But whatever it is, generally what you do on set is you cover the screen in green, and then you have to remove that. Well, it's hard to get a track when someone is also waving their hands in front of it. It's not very easy. But with a planar tracker, you don't need access to all the points, all the corners, all the time. So even if someone's waving their hand, tapping a thing, you've still got a very solid track on there, which makes the rest of the process pretty simple. So here's an example I'm sure many of you have had to deal with. Someone comes to you and you're going to be working on a video for an app, and instead of filming the app on a phone, they've decided, well, we're going to film some green screen or blue screen of a phone, someone's finger waving in front of it. Just add it in post. Just add that in. It's so simple. Well, with Mocha, that is very simple. It's as simple as a few clicks, drawing a few shapes, and then waiting for the track to be done, and that's it. So what we're not going to deal with is using, say, key light to remove the screen. I'm sure you know how to do this. What I want to show off is how Mocha Pro makes it really easy to attach points to the screen that you can make use of. So what we'd do if we wanted to work with this clip here, grab the clip, import it, trim it down to the size we're interested in, and then apply that Mocha Pro plugin to the clip, launch Mocha Pro. So this is very similar to the first amazing thing we did, which was putting stuff on things. So we're doing essentially the same thing. We're putting stuff on this screen. We want to put some stuff on this screen, and it's very similar. The big thing that's different is you always have someone's sort of finger poking into the middle, being very agitating and annoying. That would make most trackers just fall apart trying to get around this finger if you're using like point trackers and stuff like that. So using a planar tracker, though, we're going to be taking a holistic look at this shape here, and we'll be able to say, well, look at this, but don't look at this finger, for example. So do look at the phone, don't look at the finger, don't look at the reflection on the screen. All that is confusing. So what we're going to do is use the X splines here to just draw around the thing we're interested in looking at. In this case, it's the entire face of the phone that we're interested in looking at, making sure we've got all of that face just inside the spline, just like that. And this is the space we're interested in seeing. We're then going to use the add shape. So we're going to add inside this a space we're not interested in seeing. We're going to say, I'm not interested in seeing this middle part. And we just close that out. You can see we probably want to make this a little bit more defined about where we don't want to see exactly. So we can do that with these handles. Just like that. So we're just making these nice rigid handles like that. So boom, we've got the outside and the inside. And what we can do is we can go view, and you can look at mats. And we can look at the mats and you can see, okay, this white area is the area we're interested in tracking, and this will be ignored. So that's going to be pretty good. So then we just track forward and backwards like we did in the original example. We're going to increase our pixels used up to 90. We're still using the luminance channel, and we can just track away. So we just track backwards, see how it goes. It seems to be holding pretty firm on there, looking good. And now the dangerous part where the finger is in the way, and we'll see how it does, how it fares with that track. Oh, it's looking pretty solid on there. Looking pretty solid. Good. Okay, so we've got the track on there. And what we're going to do is, again, put the grid on. We have these squares, and there is this nice blue rectangle for us to line up this sort of grid on here, this perspective panel that allows us to say, well, is this looking correct? Are these lines lining up with the universe as we perceive it? And then we can just scrub through and see, oh yeah, well, it is kind of lining up with the universe. So that is working out. That looks like a pretty reliable track to me. So then we will save. We just save this here. We close it down. And then here in the Mocha Pro module, we go into the tracking data. And we want to make a new null object in here just for something that will hold the tracking data. So we're making that null. We're going to the phone screen. And we're saying, we're going to export not the corner pin, but the transform data. We're going to export it to null2. And we want to create tracking data for layer 1. Okay. It's going to populate that in. And you could use the corner pin data if you would like. It's perfectly good. So what we do is we apply the export, and it's going to apply it to the null object. And you can see that it's going to hold with the screen very nicely, not being confused at all because the data is ignoring the weird finger. And then what we want to do is just throw some content down. I'm going to throw that content down, and it's going to go under that hole. So using Keylight to punch a hole with very minimal changing of the settings. You really just use the eyedropper and you're good to go. You're going to take that phone content, you're going to parent it to the null object. You might need to rotate it a little bit. So I'm going to rotate about 90 degrees. And then we just scale it down a little bit so that it fits in. And look at that. It looks like that is on the screen. It's doing very well. So the ability to track this plane, this screen plane, and ignore this finger, so it doesn't matter if it's in the way. You could wave your hand, you can do whatever, and we don't care about it. We're able to say, look at this, don't look at that. And it gives us amazingly accurate position, rotation, scale, perspective. It's terrific. I highly recommend. Thing number 5, you can insert 3D things into your scene. So while this is a planar tracker, this is also a software that's able to take a look at 2 planes and give you reliable camera tracking data from that. So it can solve your 3D scene using planar tracking. Now, Adobe After Effects comes with a built-in 3D camera solver, but doesn't work all the time, and sometimes it fails, and there's really nothing you can do to get it back on track. The scene is just too complex, there's too much motion. But as soon as that fails, I go right into Mocha, and as long as I have two non-coplanar surfaces, then I'm able to get a reliable track out of it. If there isn't a lot in the scene to kind of track anything onto, if it's a nebulous void, then there aren't many trackers that can help you out. But by doing a little bit of manual work and using the much more powerful tools of Mocha, then you're able to solve a lot of problems that automatic trackers kind of fall down on. So how do we get a planar tracker to give us 3D information? Well, in Mocha Pro, all we need to do is give Mocha two planes of information, two planes that are different. So when we talk about non-coplanar planes, we're talking about how the top of the table and the side of the table are not parallel but are perpendicular to each other. And even though the top of the table and the floor are parallel to each other, they're not on the same plane, so movement of the camera will be apparent because they're not on the same plane. So we need kind of a parallax move or some kind of zooming or something in the shot to show us the differences between these planes, and that will tell Mocha everything it needs to know. So in order to make the process go, we need to open Mocha, crack that open. So you trim your clip, you apply the effect, you click the button, and then this opens. And what we need to do is pick two planes that we want to work with. Well, I think we should work with the top of the table and the side of the table. So we just draw our splines on here. We just draw on. Here's the side of the table. Wonderful, good job. And then we'll just make a new one, a new spline here for the top of the table. Very nice, just drawn in these patches, and we just draw them in so we can get a good track. So this is very similar to putting stuff on things, or it's similar to the screen replace, tracking the areas. But the big thing that's different is we need to show the planar surface, and we need to line the planar surface up so that it's accurate. Very accurate planar surfaces are going to make this work. So I'm cheating a little bit because I'm using a table that I know has fairly parallel lines on it, which allows me to make this fairly accurate pretty easily. So let's kind of line this up until it looks, correct. And we know it's correct when, it seems parallel across many of these lines. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's lining up over there. And I think this will do it. So that looks accurate to me. So that's one of them taken care of. And so we can rename this. Perhaps we call this top. This is the top layer. And then on the side layer, we have the same kind of thing to do. We need to line this up so that it is accurate to where we're at. That's kind of on the edge down there, so we know that this is going to be kind of close. Here we go. So that's looking pretty good there. So we've got one plane, we've got another plane, we've got the gear turned on for both of them, so we're going to track them both into the shot. And we're going to accelerate this tracking so you don't have to sit here and wait for the program to do that, so we can move on. All right, so we've got our two planes. They look to be tracked in. So now we go to the Camera Solve tab, and we can say, what kind of movement this was. Was it a large parallax? Was it a small parallax change? So we can say that. We can say sort of what the focal length of the camera is and whether there's zooming or not. So we set those parameters, and then we say solve. We say solve it up. And from what we've told it, it thinks it's got a quality of about 99%, which is pretty good. Then we can export the camera data. We would like the After Effects 3D motion data. Copy that to the clipboard. We go back into After Effects, closing this, saving it, putting our playhead at the start of the composition. Then we just go Edit, Paste Mocha Camera. And we see some pasting going on. We have a camera, and we can call up some properties of that. Keyframes on position, rotation, and zoom, even though the zoom actually doesn't change even a little bit. And I think that's pretty good. If you scrub through, kind of see that these nulls appear to be attached to the surfaces, so that is looking pretty promising. So I think the next thing to do is to put something in there and see how it feels. So let's use the AV3 logo, and we'll just put that out there. We'll make it 3D. And we will parent it. We'll parent it to one of these nulls out there. So I think what we'll do is we'll parent it to this one over here, the layer 5 top left. All right, so we'll just hold down shift as we parent so that it goes right there. And then we can kind of scale this down as we need, move it up a bit, and then we'll just move it back a little bit, and then we'll rotate it a little. And let's put it over here. A little bit more rotation needed. And there we go. So now if we play that back, it looks like this is in the scene. I'm just going to move it a little bit so it's not, doesn't feel like it's inside the table. And there we go. Now it's kind of hovering over top of the table, which is pretty fun. You can duplicate that, and you can parent it to the other logo. We could make a little shadow out of it. -90 like this. Put it down like so. So it's touching sort of where we feel the top of the table might be. To rotate things just a little bit so it's casting the shadow as we'd like. And then we can just do something like a Gaussian blur, kind of blur it up a bunch. Then we can just play that back, and you can see now we've got a little bit of a shadow on the table, and it's that easy. So what's great about the Mocha 3D tracking is if you're able to define a couple of planes, even if there's people kind of walking in the way sometimes, or maybe it's a lot of movement in the camera, or maybe there aren't a lot of high points of contrast, whatever it is, if the internal After Effects tracker fails, you can usually go into Mocha, find two planes, define them, get them tracked in, work with the track, get that locked down, and then you've got pretty reliable 3D data coming out of it. It is pretty great to have that backup, to have the ability to solve problems when things start to fall apart. So this has been the top 5 things you can do in Mocha from Boris FX, available now at av3software.com. AV3 Software is a place where you can manage all of your licenses in one place and enjoy great discounts on professional software. So the links in the description take you to Mocha 5 as a plugin and standalone product, and Mocha VRs. Thank you so much for watching, and head on over to av3software.com today.